You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. This afternoon in the plains and for tomorrow, we have a little bit of an unusual situation taking place. Not super unusual. It's just not the normal situation. And there's the possibility for this to lead to blowing dust, perhaps even a dust storm. I just wanted to go over the chances of this happening. So you look at a number of National Weather Service forecast offices. A common theme out there is the mention of blowing dust. This is from the Midland, Texas National Weather Service, Dodge City, Kansas National Weather Service, also the Goodland, Kansas National Weather Service, and many others, probably every single one along the plains. Blowing dust possibility for this afternoon into this evening, and then again tomorrow. And in fact, for tomorrow, the Dodge City National Weather Service has mentioned the possibility of an all-day blowing dust event, while the Goodland National Weather Service is one of the only ones, perhaps the only one, that also put a slash dust storm. Now, the chances for a dust storm, it doesn't really seem to really be in the forecast. In fact, for most locations, you'll see in the forecast, it will say areas of blowing dust or patchy areas of blowing dust. There are some locations which are expecting a widespread blowing dust event, but it's difficult to find those areas. Nonetheless, dust storms a lot of times are not predicted. They happen out of nowhere, and it could be very hazardous. So I just wanted to discuss why the possibility for tomorrow, a dust storm, is higher than usual. This is what I think, but I'm also going to back this up based upon the April 14th, 1935 dust storm, which was considered the most severe dust storm in history, and it's been nicknamed Black Sunday in the plains. So first of all, one would think, and this is really the case, this is truly the case, if you look into dust storms. I am no expert into dust storms. I just looked this stuff up, and I do not live in the plains. So, but dust storms generally occur along a gust front. Gust fronts occur ahead of thunderstorms. So a gust front, you have really strong winds. You have the dry soil. Dry soil, of course, is a necessity. You have to have the fuel for the dust storm. It could either be sand or it could be dirt. It could be soil, but it has to be dry. So if you have drought conditions, such as something that we have going on right now, right now in Colorado, Kansas, that whole area, Kansas, you have portions there getting a moderate drought. You have areas in Colorado getting an extreme and a severe drought, all different types of drought levels. But perhaps even more importantly, the soil is at 0% moisture levels across that area. We also have, it's kind of the very beginning of the growing season, so we don't really have much of anything growing to keep the soil in place. So this could be one reason why we have seen some pretty bad dust storms this time of the year as opposed to the summer, even though in general they're more common in the summer. That's because this time of the year, it's the very beginning of the growing season, so things are not really in place. So the gust front, which is ahead of thunderstorms, not only do you have strong winds, but you also have more of an upward wind. Okay, keep that in mind. You have more of an upward wind since you have low pressure approaching. Okay, you also have the dirt is dry. Now, let's think about what happens after the thunderstorms move through. You have a cold front. A cold front, you generally have winds which are sometimes even stronger, certainly for a longer period of time. The thinking, if you were to visualize it, the thinking is that they would be a downward wind. However, and you would generally associate that with moist soil because precipitation moved through the Great Plains. So you would think a dust storm would not be as likely by a cold front than it would be as a gust front ahead of the thunderstorms. So a lot of times they're associated with a gust front. However, the 1935, April 14th, dust storm, the worst in history, called the Black Blizzard because that's what it was. Visibility dropped to zero. It moved 800 miles from the Dakotas to the Mexican-Texas border over the day on April 15th. That was associated with a cold front behind a system. Okay, now, how could you have winds with a cold front blow up dust if it just rained? Well, here's the thing. The situation, and this is what I mean by it's not exactly normal. Usually, when we have storm systems that move through the plains, we have that severe weather risk, but we also have widespread precipitation expected. This time around, you'll notice we have a severe weather risk, but every single National Weather Service forecast office is using the terms conditional and even very conditional. There will be likely a pop-up supercell and pop-up thunderstorms in some locations, but not widespread. The environment could remain capped during the entire episode, which means when the cold front moves through, in some locations, the soil will remain dry. Okay, another thing we have going on over here is these high wind watches and high wind warnings for tomorrow. These winds that are occurring behind the front, like we have seen. It's a theme we have seen this year. The winds are something phenomenal. 30 to 45 mile per hour sustained winds. 40 mile per hour sustained winds, that's already tropical storm criteria, along with wind gusts, 70 mile per hour wind gusts, 60, 70. I've seen higher than that when you get into Colorado. So we have extremely strong winds. The soil is dry. The one thing that I would think that could prevent this from happening would be if we do get a widespread rain, or if you get rain in the area that's most prone to the dust storms. If you look at the European computer model, you'll see the dust mass becomes quite intense in portions of southeast Colorado and portions of southwest Kansas. However, the National Weather Service for Goodland, Kansas, informs us that the portion of Kansas that's most likely to see the dust storm, the area at highest risk, is northwest Kansas. They're also mentioning Govey County. I believe that's the name of the county. And they actually, to be most accurate, they are not mentioning dust storm. They are just calling this blowing dust. So blowing dust is what is forecasted for today and tomorrow. Areas of blowing dust, most areas just patchy places of blowing dust, developing generally in the late morning, early afternoon, but especially mid to late afternoon into the early evening. Nothing really going on in the early morning. And for most areas, it's not expected to be widespread. That's what is in the forecast. The Dodge City, Kansas National Weather Service did mention yesterday the possibility of the blowing dust being an all-day event on Tuesday. A dust storm sounds a little bit more intense, and that terminology is not being used. In general, it's not being used by the National Weather Service forecast offices that I looked into. So, nonetheless, realize that is a possibility. And regarding dust storm safety, you'll notice that it says pull over. You can look up the safety tips yourself to get more of a clarity on exactly what you're supposed to do. But one of the more interesting things that I saw is that when you pull over, you're supposed to put your emergency brake on, and you're supposed to take your foot off the gas pedal, off the brake. So, okay, but usually it doesn't explain why. So today I saw the reason why. It's because when you put your foot on the brake, it keeps the brake lights on. And the combination of that with the reduced visibility increases the chances for a car crash behind you. So you do not want to have the brake lights on. You can look more into that if you want. And you do want to, they recommend keeping the seatbelt fastened and things like that. So you can look more into dust safety tips if you want. And again, it's mostly blown. We've already seen blowing dust. We've had a couple of dust storms already this year, a few of them. And that's generally patterns tend to continue. And so it's something worth mentioning for tomorrow that there is a good argument to say that we would be getting a dust storm. The we means someplace here in the United States. The plains, we're referring to some area in the plains. Kansas seems to be a high prone area, along with portions of Oklahoma. New Mexico, several areas of blowing dust developed yesterday across southern New Mexico, Midland, Texas. And we should mention that the Rio Grande Village, Texas, is forecasted to see a high temperature of 105 degrees this afternoon. Stay safe. You've been listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. This podcast can be found on almost every platform where podcasts are available.